So I filmed this video over a month ago now, and I wasn't sure whether or not to share it. Obviously, this is very personal, and it feels a little scary to be sharing, but I felt like I should. And so just before I get into it, I wanted to say that, you know, this video is going to be heavy, but I hope that it also conveys a message of hope and joy amidst grief. It's crazy to me to think that less than 2 months ago, I experienced what was probably the worst day of my life, even including my years of severe chronic illness and all that came along with that. This especially was the worst day of my life that I've ever experienced. Emotionally, it completely just shattered my heart, and I felt like I couldn't keep going. But now here I am, less than 2 months later, and I'm doing really well. And I know that a lot of that is because of all that I've learned over the last few years, healing my nervous system, and I just feel really blessed that I have so many tools to help guide me through difficult situations in life, because those are always going to come. I've definitely changed a lot through this, and I've learned a lot, and it just reminds me of how resilient we are as humans and how God really did design our bodies and our minds to heal. I'll go ahead and get into the video now. It is quite long, but I hope that it can encourage others, especially those that have gone through pregnancy loss. Hey my friends, so today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. It's actually going to be sharing my experience with my first pregnancy and going on to lose that baby. This is something that happened a little over 3 weeks ago, and so it is still somewhat fresh, and this is something that broke my heart in a way that I have never experienced before. And even with all that I went through with severe chronic illness, this was one of the hardest things that I've ever been through, especially emotionally and mentally. I was so excited to be pregnant. I was so excited to become a mom. I've always wanted to be a mom ever since I was a little girl, and that's probably because I have the best mom. My mom is amazing. I always wanted to be a mom young. I'm pushing 30 now. I'm almost 29, and I kind of imagine myself becoming a mom in my early 20s. And I know that might sound crazy to some of you, but to me, I just always kind of felt like that was going to be one of my biggest purposes in life, and something I really looked forward to, and I still look forward to. But of course, I had my experience with chronic illness. I was way too sick to ever consider having a child, and for a long time I grieved the idea that I was likely to not be able to have kids in the future. And in a lot of ways, I didn't even know if I would live to see 30. And so in the last few years, we have experienced a lot of miracles, and I have seen incredible healing, and I'm so grateful for that. It's been a hard few years too, though. I think sometimes when you're really sick, you see healing as this perfect, amazing thing that just like happens out of nowhere, but healing is a long and it's a hard process, and it's so much hard work. It is so difficult to heal from chronic illness, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Just everything that goes along with it is a roller coaster. But anyway, I guess I'm getting off topic now. So earlier this year, I found out that I was pregnant, and this was really exciting and joyful. And so when I found out I was pregnant, Jake's brother was visiting, and they were actually playing pickleball, and I took the test right before we left to go to the airport to go to Florida. And I just was like, I don't think this is possible, but I'll just take the test just to make sure, so I don't wonder about it while we're away. And the test was positive, and I couldn't believe it. I just felt like that was in a way, like, it felt like that was my reward for working so hard to heal. I feel really blessed that I am in a place where I am healthy enough to start a family. Anyway, so the coming weeks are really exciting, but as those of you who have experienced pregnancy know, it kind of slows down time. And for me, my focus shifted, and I felt so connected to this baby, and I loved this baby more than I could ever imagine. For not being able to hold them or meet them, they were a part of me, and I enjoyed my time being pregnant. I felt really good. I focused on nourishing my body and also taking care of my nervous system. I took a step back from social media, and I tried my best to just care for my mental state, my nervous system, and fuel my body well, because I wanted this baby to be as healthy as they possibly could be. And so when I was about, I don't know, I wasn't even 6 weeks pregnant at this point, but my sister was the first one in my family to know. She actually just guessed it. I walked in the door and she looked at me and she said, "Do you have something to tell me?" And I said, I don't know. I don't think so. And she looked at me again and she said, "Are you pregnant?" And so I said yes, and I told her, because I was like, if anyone guesses it, I'll just tell them. And she said, "You have a glow." And so I guess she just had this sense, and she knew that I was pregnant. And so then after that, a couple of days later, when I was about 6 weeks, I told my sister, my other sister, and we had a onesie made up that said "baby coming" in January of 2025. The due date was January 7th. And I put it in a little bag. And I was like, "Oh, here, I got this for you." And she opened it up and she had the most amazing reaction. She was so excited. And we both cried. And my parents were actually out of town at the time, and I was so excited to tell them, but I wanted to tell them in person. And so I had to wait until I was 8 weeks pregnant for the whole family to get together. And we were celebrating my dad's birthday. And I used that same onesie and I wrapped it in a gift bag for my dad. And he had the most amazing reaction and also the most funny reaction. His face is something that you could probably make a meme out of. But I'll put a video in here showing his reaction.
Are you ready?
No way!
Oh my God.
Oh, wonderful!
Rachel's pregnant. Rachel's pregnant.
Oh my goodness, what a way to surprise me. Oh, wonderful. Oh.
Rachel's gonna have a baby.
Congratulations.
That was one of the most joyful moments of my life, was telling my family that I was pregnant. And just the joy and excitement was tangible. And I felt so blessed to have a family that was so excited for me and for us to have a baby. And it was just a joyful night. It was so much fun, and my dad said it was the best birthday present that he ever could have gotten. And at that point, everything was still going really well, and I felt good. Of course, I think everybody with pregnancy has doubts to some extent, or worries if something would happen. And I remember every once in a while having the thought pop into my head, like, if I were to lose this baby, with every single day that passes by, I am going to be more and more heartbroken. And at about 9 weeks, I started bleeding, And it got to the point where it became concerning. I wasn't sure if it was normal or not, because sometimes it can be with pregnancy, and so it's hard to know. We had a trip to Europe planned the following week, and I was waiting to be seen until after that because everything was going well. But when this started happening, we decided to go see a midwife, and they got us in right away, and she took out a ultrasound, just kind of like the small one, handheld, and she put it on my abdomen. And at first she said that she couldn't even find my uterus, and she said she couldn't find anything. And I did know that I had a tilted uterus from ultrasounds, when I was chronically ill, so I wasn't thinking of that at this point. But she said, because I can't find anything and because of the bleeding, I'm gonna say with almost certainty that this is a miscarriage, that you're losing the baby. And hearing those words was one of the most shattering moments of my life. I loved that baby with everything that I had, and I was so excited to be a mom. And so I just started sobbing, and they were very compassionate and kind. They drew my blood and basically said they'd see what the blood test said, and then in the morning they would take me in for a transvaginal ultrasound to see what was going on, but that I was almost certainly losing the baby. And so in my mind, that's what I had accepted. And I, on the way home, just felt like I couldn't breathe. And we got home, and I just laid in bed, and I was devastated in a way that I didn't even know was possible. And I remember telling Jake, as he was there, in my worst moment, like, I don't know if I can keep going. I don't know if I want to without this baby. And now I'm glad to still be here. I have so much hope for the future, and I still have joy, but the grief over losing this baby was intense. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because a lot of people go through this. A lot of people have miscarriages, and it's very common, but that, because it's common, doesn't take away from how heartbreaking it is. And the loss of a child is just, it's heartbreaking. And from the minute you take a positive pregnancy test, you are already anticipating that baby coming into your life and planning for it, getting excited for it, looking at things for babies, baby clothing, all these things. And that's a good thing. Planning is a good thing. We have to take action in order for things to happen. But sometimes God has something else in mind. And of course, that's hard. Anyway, after we had that news and I told my family about it, my family kind of started researching, and my parents were like, it's very common for the baby to not be able to be seen on abdominal ultrasound, and maybe things could be just fine. And so after having accepted the loss, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to have hope again, but I decided that I would. And I did have hope again. I hoped with everything I had that this baby would be safe and healthy, and that we would be able to keep the baby. And in desperation, we were praying, and I called on some of my close friends to pray. We had already told several of our close friends at church, and that night I felt really lifted up in prayer. And I think maybe kind of in the back of my mind, I knew that this would happen, but I hoped with everything I had that the outcome would be different. And I was researching all sorts of things, stories that were similar where the baby ended up being okay. And the next morning, we waited to get in with the ultrasound, and my mom and my sister came over. We were just sitting there outside, and everything just felt so heavy. Like I felt like I just like frozen, like I couldn't move and like I couldn't think, and just feeling like I wanted to know what was going on, but I really didn't, because I was scared for what the news might be. And so the time finally came that we had the ultrasound, and he was able to find my uterus, and he found the gestational sac, and there was no heartbeat, and the sac was measuring at about 6 weeks. And he said, yep, you're having a miscarriage. And he was also very compassionate and gentle and kind. But in that moment, I almost felt numb, because I had already accepted the loss the day before, and then I had hoped so much again. And then the answer was the same, that we were losing the baby. And I just felt like my world had been shattered. And afterwards we came home, and this was 3 days before we were supposed to leave on a big trip to Europe. And my midwife had said, I think you should go if you physically can. And but in that moment, I didn't care about the trip. I didn't care about anything but my baby. And I would have given anything to keep that baby, anything. But this was God's will, and so I had to keep going. And there was also kind of this fear of like, I haven't had the miscarriage yet. I don't want to be on a plane and in the middle of a miscarriage. And so there was kind of that element of, I didn't know when, but they were hoping that it would happen soon because the bleeding had already started. And at this point I was about 9.5 weeks pregnant, and that night was the most intense night of the miscarriage. And I think something that is also not talked about a lot is miscarriage is intense. It can be really, really intense. I think kind of the further along you get, sometimes the more intense it is, but of course it's a different experience for every person. But you're having contractions, you're essentially like going into labor, and it's very painful. But strangely enough, it felt fitting. Everybody's situation is different, but for me, I didn't want to take any sort of pain medication. I didn't want to repress the pain, because the pain matched how I was feeling emotionally. And overall it was a lot. It takes a physical toll, that's for sure. The night was rough, and then the next day all my family came over at separate times throughout the day, and a couple of friends from church. And so it was exhausting because I was still, feeling really weak. But I felt very supported, and I felt really grateful that those same people that were so excited for us and celebrating for us when we told them about the pregnancy, those same people came and they sat with me in my grief. And that just meant a lot to me. And some of these loved ones had also experienced pregnancy loss, and it can be comforting to talk to people that have been through similar things, but ultimately I think it's more about just sitting with people and just listening and not trying to fix. And I had 2 friends from church come over. One of them brought me a steak, which was really sweet and needed because I was feeling weak. But one of them had experienced miscarriage, actually in the same exact way I had with her first, and she doesn't have children. And the other one has a baby and has not experienced a miscarriage. And both of those friends just sat with me, and they listened, and they cried with me, and I felt equally, there's a bug, I felt equally as supported by the girl who had experienced miscarriage and the girl who had not, because they both did what Jesus would have done and just sat with me and listened and supported. And I felt so grateful for that. I do have a lot to be grateful for. So the next day was the packing day, the preparation day. I waited to decide if we were going on the trip until the Saturday. We were leaving on the Sunday. Until the next day, just because I needed to just give myself time. My mom helped me pack and got everything ready, and we went on the trip the next day. And it was a lot, not being physically recovered from a miscarriage. And then, of course, the emotions and grief that come along with the miscarriage, and just the hormone drop that comes with it, right? Like, it's essentially a postpartum in terms of how your hormones are affected. And so the trip was a roller coaster, but I ended up being glad that we went. And there were times where I would just wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I couldn't breathe because I just wanted my baby back. And it was hard to enjoy things because that was what I wanted, and nothing could compare to that. As time went on with the trip, this trip was 2.5 weeks long. I guess I started to feel more and more like myself and started to be able to find joy more. And this trip was also when we were supposed to tell Jake's parents and his family about the baby. And I was so excited for that. There's something about telling people in person, and with the first baby, it was going to be their first grandchild, and I was so excited. And I had that same onesie, and at the top of my packing list for this trip was the onesie. And so that day when we met up with his family, we spent about half the trip with them and half without. I was really struggling because that was the day we were supposed to tell them, and it was all a lot. It was really hard. It was hard being around people. It was hard being around crowds, and just the nature of grief when you don't know when you're just gonna have something trigger this intense feeling of grief. But I told Jake before we left, I said, I'm gonna need a lot of support and encouragement because this is going to be really hard, and he really came through and supported me through that. But at the end of the trip, we were able to go on a hike in Switzerland, and I was feeling physically stronger. And I don't know if you guys have been following for a while, but before I became bedbound and unable to work, I worked for a trekking and hiking company in Switzerland. Their tours were in Switzerland, and I was supposed to go to Switzerland once a year to go on the tours, to go on these amazing trekking tours and make content for them. And that was what was a part of the job, but I never got to go. I was not well enough, and it started from me working full-time in the office while being sick, to working part-time there, part-time at home, to being all at home, to being part-time, to quitting when I was too sick to keep working. And so that was kind of another added layer of grief, but it was a really big victory to be there in Switzerland and to be healthy and to be strong enough to hike and enjoy that and be there with Jake. And so that was a victory and a joy from the trip.
Hello. You are in the waterfall. Yes.
We just got some raw milk for $1.50 and Dolomites. It's delicious. This is a super easy part, or else I wouldn't be filming.
Hello, Rachel.
Hey. It's a little scary.
You got it.
A little more scary than I expected, to be honest.
It's good, nice views. Except you can't see the Matterhorn, unfortunately. Too many clouds, but it's so fun.
3, 2, 1. I think I'm just doing my best to hold space for both my grief and my joy. And I've had some good moments since we've lost the baby. And like the other night, some friends stayed at our house and we stayed up way later than we usually do. And it got to that point where everything is just so funny. And that laughter just felt like medicine to me, to my soul. And I will say that I'm sharing this not to complain or ask for pity or anything like that. I really do feel blessed beyond measure. Sometimes I feel like I have too much, but I definitely dealt with feelings of shame after losing my baby. And I just wondered, like, am I really not as healthy as I thought I was? In this space that I'm in the self-healing space and the carnivore animal-based space, I hear so many stories of people having recurrent miscarriages and infertility, and then when changing their diet to carnivore or doing brain retraining for a certain amount of time, that they stop having miscarriages and they're able to have healthy babies. And maybe I was naive, but I thought that my chance would be less because of all I've done to improve my health and to heal. And so that aspect of this has been difficult for me. Just recently I had quite a bit of blood work done just because I wanted to make sure that I didn't have any sort of deficiencies or thyroid issues or anything like that going on that could have contributed to a potential miscarriage, and everything came back perfectly clear. And so that's good. And so the type of miscarriage that I had is called a blighted ovum. And so basically, from what I've read, it seems that the pregnancy is not going to work out even from the moment of conception, but you don't know. And you just continue to grow the sac and the placenta, and I think almost, it sounds terrible, but the baby can like disintegrate. It is terrible, but typically this kind doesn't happen more than once, and according to what we've researched, it's a chromosomal problem that the baby just, it wasn't going to work out regardless. And so I mean, that's encouraging to know that it usually doesn't happen more than once. Everybody says it's not your fault, there's nothing you could have done. And I did everything I could to nourish and take care of this baby. But some small part of me has to wonder, like, could there have been something I could have done differently? But I guess I'll never truly know the answer to that, and nobody else does. But one thing I do know is that I am going to continue to prioritize my health and continue to eat nourishing foods that support my health and my fertility. And we were blessed to get pregnant right away. And so I hope that in some sense that what I have done to improve my health and heal over these years has really contributed to that. For a long time, I did not have a period. So I'm guessing even when I was really sick, even though we weren't trying to get pregnant, if we had, I'm guessing we probably would have really struggled. And so I feel really grateful that my body has healed so much. And I actually talked with my friend Rebecca, who is in a very, very similar situation to me. She actually had the same type of miscarriage with her first and now has a healthy baby, but she was severely ill and dying. She was like 60 pounds at 5'7" or something like that, and she didn't have that long to live and had all sorts of chronic illnesses, the whole long list. And she healed and gained the weight back and is healthy and is exercising, living a normal life, and worked hard for that with her years of intensive healing. And she had the same experience with me after she had experienced all this healing and gotten pregnant, that she lost the baby, and she, shared that she had similar feelings. And so these things just happen, and it's really good to continue improving your health and doing all you can to support your fertility. Also, the husband doing that too, because that is 50% of the equation when it comes to having a baby and fertility. But, even after all we can do, sometimes things still happen. Sometimes we still experience loss, and that is the reality of living in a broken world. I think that when we go through things like this, God has a way of showing us tender mercies, and I've seen a lot of those in the last few weeks, and a lot of those have been through other people who have been like angels for me and lifted me up. And I think sometimes these types of things can help teach us to accept help and accept comfort when we need it, because that's hard to do too. I think we have this tendency of like wanting to close off and not accept help and just say that we're fine, but it's okay to accept help and support. And that's another thing that I've been learning. Something really important to me, even since I first heard that we were losing the baby, was not wanting fear to overcome me and take away my joy of hopefully future pregnancies and children. Because I know that's so easy to do, especially after experiencing loss. And obviously I'm not going to be perfect at it, and I'm sure I'll have some doubts, but I believe that God can help me still have joy and still have excitement, and to let go of fear as much as I can, because God doesn't give us the spirit of fear. Fear is not from God, and He really can help us let go of our fears. Those are not just words written in the scriptures. That's real. He can help us let go of our fears and step into trust and step into joy. And so I really just hope that in the future I will be able to trust my body and trust God, more importantly, that no matter what the outcome, that things will be okay. And so I just feel grateful that families will be together forever, that my baby is safe, My baby is in heaven, and I have a guardian angel now. I know this video has gotten really long, but there are just a couple more things I wanted to touch on. And the first one is that if you've gone through pregnancy loss, don't let anyone belittle or downplay what you've been through. No matter if you were 4 weeks pregnant and had a loss right away, or if you were way farther along, it is a real loss. From the moment you take a pregnancy test and receive a positive, it changes your life. It changes you forever. And so don't let anyone belittle that and tell you, oh, it's a good thing that you were only X number of weeks along. I think as humans, we have this tendency to compare and to downplay and to think that our own suffering is so much worse than other people's. And that's something I learned through chronic illness, is that comparison is never a good thing. And everybody goes through hard things, different things, very different things. And whatever it is that people struggle with, if it's hard for them, then it's a valid concern. And I think about Jesus and how he went through worse things than we could ever imagine. But he doesn't say, oh, it could be worse, or, you know, it's not as bad as what I went through. When we seek him for help, he comforts us, he validates us, he sits with us in our grief, and that's what he calls us to do for our loved ones. And so that's something that I have definitely learned through this, and yeah, I'm grateful for that. I think one of the reasons that I went through this is maybe just to be able to be there and support others that have also experienced the same thing. And now I know the deep loss that comes with losing a baby. And it is a baby. Even though we never got to hold them in our arms, it was a life. And so that is a true and deep loss. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, I know I've had questions about this, is if I'm worried about future children with my history of severe chronic illness. And actually the answer is no. I'm not worried at all. And I feel that because of what I went through and what I learned from what I went through about nutrition, about regulating the nervous system, and just supporting your body to be as healthy as it can be, I feel like my future children will be so much better set up to hopefully be healthy, God willing, than they would have been if I had not gone through chronic illness. Because the reality is, the world that we're living in, everybody is sick. It is not uncommon. It is not rare. And unless we're proactively doing things to prevent and reverse illness, then it's almost like a ticking time bomb. And kids are very sick these days. And so I just feel so grateful to have learned what I have and what I continue to learn through this whole experience, and I do feel confident that my children can be healthy. I appreciate any of you that have stuck around to the end of this video. I know it's a long one, but this is just me kind of processing everything I went through and sharing that in case others can relate or find peace and comfort in it. And overall, I am very grateful that I have had so much support during this time, and that God has carried me through something that I felt like I couldn't get through. And that's not the first time that's happened in my life. And so it really is amazing how resilient our bodies are and how we were designed to heal. But healing is hard. It isn't easy. And so I don't want this account to just be the positive and the good. I want to be real. I want to share the ups and downs, because that's how life goes. Even past chronic illness, life is hard, but it is joyful and it is amazing. And I'm so grateful for all these experiences, because I think that grief really increases our capacity for joy if we let it. And I feel very hopeful for the future and for future pregnancies. And I just want to make sure that I can let go of fear as much as possible and just trust that it's in God's hands after all I can do. I know this video has been heavy, but it's real. This is my experience with pregnancy loss, and it's been a really difficult one, but I am doing better and I'm physically feeling more like myself. I'm starting to have motivation again to start working again, and I am letting joy back into my life and trusting that God is watching over me, that God is watching over our baby, and having lots of hope for the future for the family that I've wanted for so long. And so with that, I will end this video. I hope that the next videos will be, I don't know if more uplifting is the right word or more fun. But thank you guys so much for coming along on my journey and for all of your encouragement and support. It means the world to me, and I am praying for you and rooting for you always, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.